In North Dakota, a train carrying crude oil derails and explodes. In Canada, a crude oil train crashes into a town, killing 47 people. Another derails and blows up in Alabama. These are just accidents that many people in Lamy are invoking in their opposition to a planned crude oil transfer station recently announced by Pacer Trucking of Oklahoma. Now, given that the fate of Amtrak's route through Lamy appears fuzzy as well, some are looking at this as an economic opportunity. Others are worried about the impact on water and the quality of life. But whether they have any recourse to protest is very unclear. So joining us to talk about this and other news of the week, we have Laura Sanchez. She is CEO of the New Mexico Green Chamber of Commerce. And returning to the line table is former State Representative Dede Feldman, State Senator Dede Feldman. I'm sorry, Dan's up there ready for his fist bump.
Premature excitement.
Do it right now. Former Republican whip. That's that man right there in the House of Representatives. And back this week, online regular Rob Nicoleski joins us once again as well. Laura, let me start with you. All fun and games aside, this is a very serious issue going across the country. We're right here in the crosshairs of it. Here in New Mexico, you deal with the environment a lot. Let's talk about this recourse issue. This is a difficulty. Huge town meeting, 275 people in Lamy, obvious concern, a well 110 feet away from this railroad spur. What can folks do at this point, given no one can really do anything, can pull a lever literally to make this stop?
Right. Well, I think they're doing everything that they can, and I think I have to commend them for organizing as a town the way that they have very quickly on short notice about this. I think one of the frustrating things for the residents of Lamy and the surrounding areas is that they feel like they haven't been heard at all, that nobody has given any public notice or opportunity to comment prior to making these kinds of decisions.
It's amazing to think that a company is not obligated to do such a thing. With a town. How could that possibly be? That's an amazing circumstance.
Well, it's one of those things where this doesn't fall under any kind of, when you're doing a cross-state, interstate project, you have certain federal laws that apply. When you're doing a new building, sometimes there's state regulations or county ordinances that apply. We're just in a situation here where there's existing track already, and it was a private deal where, these arrangements were made, and private deals aren't subject to public input. And so you have a very interesting situation where you have a corporation's dealings that are affecting potentially the public, and I think there's a lot of outcry about that.
Sure.
So really, the only other thing to look at is maybe some kind of a public nuisance type of argument.
Interesting. Dede, good to see you, by the way, Senator, and glad to have you back. Interestingly, what struck me in this story, I haven't been through Lamy in a bit. It's been a while. I like going, but it's been a bit. I appreciated the reminder of US 285, however, in that this may not be the right kind of road to deal with all these trucks rumbling in and out of Lamy. Would you agree with that as well?
It's a long and windy road.
Right.
But here's a case where regulation has not, at either the federal, state, or county level, has not caught up with the tremendous oil boom that we are experiencing in the northern plains especially, but also in New Mexico. And so I think what you're going to see here is, it's a really active community. They were successful in getting a ban on drilling in that area a couple years ago, and the result was a land use ordinance regarding oil and gas that was considered to be a model throughout the nation. So I think you're going to see more public officials involved, including Representative Lujan and Senator Udall. Senator Peter Wirth is already involved. They're looking for alternatives, because as you say, it's a private deal. But there's a huge public risk to the water supply as well as to the people that live along 285.
Dan, good to see you. The residents, I would think, if you're aware and reading just what's going on across the country and North America, there's cause for concern. We've had a huge uptick in spills, a huge uptick in derailments. I mean, a lot of the rail is just not able to handle this kind of weight. Do we have to have a disaster here to have movement, or is regulation actually the answer?
No, Gene, you tossed the softball out for me. Do I think regulation is the answer? I think you and the viewers know my answer is no. I've never thought that regulation is the answer. I think that the derailments
when is
and
regulation
the crashes,
appropriate? When there's lives at stake, water and resources?
Well, that's a good question. I think that, first of all, I think that when you look at the amount of train accidents, derailments, things that are happening, it's not this huge spike that people are making it out to be. This stuff has happened for years. It's part of what happens when you have, this type of technology, airplanes. I mean, planes crash, trains crash, that happens. That's why they're called accidents. I think Laura made a great point. And this is to your point about when is regulation required. When there's two private people making a deal, the government shouldn't be involved. The government doesn't have a right to be involved.
But isn't that their role? Isn't that the honest third broker in the middle?
No, that's not the honest third.
Somebody has to look out for public safety.
First of all, the government's
those
not
things.
honest. See, that's where you and I disagree. You think the government is this, this third person out there that is an honest broker. The government is looking out for special interests and whoever's paying them the most to look out for it. But I think at the end of the day, what's happening is that you have two private sector folks looking for something. They've made a deal. I'll end by saying this. It's interesting it's always up in the Santa Fe area, and I'm sure you'll get lots of calls about this. As they're driving around in their Range Rovers and Land Rovers, they want cheap gas. They just don't want it in their backyard.
At what cost cheap gas is appropriate?
Well, I think that
And should the people of Lamy, is worry enough? I mean, is not worry enough to regulate something? I'd be highly concerned if I was living in Lamy.
Well, I would be too. I mean, I live in El Dorado, which is just around the corner from Lamy, so I've been there a number of times, and it is very close. Where this transfer station would be, it'd be very close to to the where there's a bar there, and
All right. That's right.
But anyway, but
God help the drunk drivers.
Yeah, right. But it seems to me that maybe a solution to this would be maybe a public-private partnership.
Okay.
Because I think that it's more than just a not in my backyard issue, although there is an element of that. But I think that maybe, that area, that rail strip goes through Lamy, goes past Lamy, goes beyond Lamy. Maybe that's where you could have this. And maybe that would be a solution that, I know that there's going to be a faction there that's not going to want this under any circumstances, even if it's miles away.
Sure.
But maybe you can get the company together with the state.
See, that's my question. We're going to finish it with Laura. Why can't the company, if good times are so good, you build down the spur a little bit further south, you know what I mean, or north, wherever the case may be. Get away from population, get away from all those things. Build what you want, but make sure you're not going to mess up, because there is going to be accidents. And we have to account for that. There are going to be accidents. So is that reasonable?
Well, I think it depends who you ask. To me, I think it is reasonable, but I will say that I've spent a lot of time in the past few years working in this area, generally not with oil and gas, but specifically looking at environmental risk as an additional factor in terms of your overall development model. And I think that we have examples in New Mexico of developers who have been able to capture that kind of environmental risk proactively and gone out and done a lot more stakeholder involvement and discussions, which really have helped them avoid some of the larger outcry and potential litigation down the road. And I think in New Mexico we have a long history, obviously, of supporting and being a partner, even in terms of our general fund, with oil and gas. And I think oil and gas has to remember that things change, and you have to try to be more proactive. You can't assume that a small community like this is going to just rubber stamp something.
That's right. In a moment, we're back with our report from the Roundhouse on the debate over tapping the land grant permanent fund to pay for more early childhood education programs here in New Mexico.